Summer routines live or die by how easy they are, and honestly, if something takes too much effort, I'm out. That's why Groons is my go-to. It's my one daily pack of gummies covering my greens, vitamins, and minerals. Plus, it has 6 grams of prebiotic fiber, which is more than 2 cups of broccoli. No mixing powders, no giant pills, no hassle. I just rip open the pack and I'm done. They taste good and they make it easy to stay on top of my health, even when life gets busy. Save up to 52% with the code PODCAST at Groons.co. That's code PODCAST at GRUNS.co.
Welcome back to the Alec Lewis Show. I am your host, Alec Lewis. This is episode 181, recording on Wednesday afternoon, July 8th. Appreciate you guys being here for our early in the week, now middle of the week, Q&A episode. Always love doing this portion of the show, and got a ton of questions from you guys on social media, on Twitter, on Instagram, that we're going to get to today. Some on what I'm looking forward to training camp, some on the quarterback situation, some on Nolan Teasley and the future involving Kyler Murray, even some Jadeveon Clowney talk sprinkled into the show today. So hope you guys enjoy it. If you're new here and watching on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify or iHeart, you can rate us, you can review us, you can give us 5 stars, and I promise we appreciate it. Little late in the week for the first show because in the middle of a move, so bear with me. We're about to soup up this show a little bit. Gonna have some additional accents as part of the show, the production of it all, and we're in the process. So here we go. Let's get right into questions before I mention our sponsor and presenting sponsors, First Resource Bank, ProMN, Great Clips, Aquarius Home Studios. We got a bunch to talk through, but first let's get right into the questions. Jason Ring asked, heading into training camp, and this was on Twitter, by the way, at Alec_Lewis, heading into training camp, what new wrinkles are you going to be looking for the most? So I viewed this question as a little schematic. I viewed this question as potentially personnel-based, strategy-based, rather than just specific, exactly what I'm looking for roster-wise, position battle-wise, quarterback-wise. We'll get to a lot of that in the later episode of this week with a guest. But here's what I came up with. I'd say first and foremost, personnel groupings on offense and defense. Like, that's always an area for me that I think is really interesting to assess. Like, where is Kevin O'Connell offensively? Where does he think he can dictate matchups the best? And who does he need on the field to feel like he can do that? I've talked a lot, or not a lot, but I've talked a little bit about it. I'll write a little bit about it. I really think one of this team's most advantaged personnel groupings in 2026 is going to be 11 personnel. And you guys who listen to the show and have probably listened to national podcasts and some of the trends and themes, you're going to be like, why? Why would the Vikings not lean in to the 13 personnel, 3 tight end usage that Los Angeles did, or that Ben Johnson has utilized multiple tight ends? Why can't the Vikings do that? I mean, I think in many ways, the personnel you have, and this isn't rocket science, but it's important to talk through for you guys and for me, the personnel you have and the strengths and weaknesses of those players should dictate the positions that you're putting them in. And so why do I say 11 personnel? Well, that's specifically including Josh Oliver, who is a run block first tight end, but also has proven an ability to catch the football a little bit. And the inclusion of the third receiver in Juwan Jennings, who is a force at the point of attack, in the run game. And I'd say one of the, as I reflected the last few weeks and last couple months on the Vikings offense under Kevin O'Connell, the Vikings offense in 2025, I mean, obviously you begin and end with quarterback play, but an area that I think the Vikings have struggled offensively is utilizing personnel groupings that really enact fear in the opposing defense, both in the run and pass. And again, some of this is tied to quarterback play. Some of it is tied to lack of run game production. But a personnel grouping with Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Juwan Jennings, and Josh Oliver, for me, that's where you can start to really force defenses to make decisions. Do they go light personnel so that you then can utilize two really good run blockers in Josh Oliver and Juwan Jennings and really create efficient rushing attacks? Or does the defense go heavy personnel to attempt to stop some of that run game, and then you have the receiving core that you have to then throw the football? So that's an area. And then just going back through, I would say, the last few years, it's always fascinating to see if there are hints for Brian Flores and the defensive staff on what he might utilize and how he might be at the tip of the spear and what that looks like kind of on a day-to-day basis when only media members or fans are out there watching. So, heading into training camp, what wrinkles am I looking for? Personnel groupings is definitely one of them. I'd say then I segue to run game concepts and the run game approach. So how much outside zone concept am I seeing where the running back's pressing the edge and cutting it back? What variations of that outside zone or just, wide zone concept, however, you want to term it. And I probably will dive in specifically with conversations with coaches on how they specifically term it. But what variations of that are they going to use? And then just what does that look like from a practice habit standpoint on a daily basis? Like that is something that I think is really important. I mean, we had at The Athletic, hopefully you guys saw it, but put together a yearly offseason survey asking you guys as fans what you think about all sorts of areas of the Vikings team. And one of the questions was, what are you most interested in besides quarterback play? And the run game was the answer there. And so for me, because I think it's important to be accountable to you guys as fans and what you're looking for, I think to have that as a wrinkle that I am going to be identifying is an important one. I think after that, just the offensive line and the daily work of the offensive line, what does that look like? How similar is it to what I saw back in June and made sure to highlight for you guys because I think it's really important. How much does it evolve? And that's both in the run game where guys were running off the ball in June workouts. And that also goes for pass protection and the amount of work they did to try to diffuse stunts. From a practice habit standpoint, that looked a little different. So the wrinkles with the O-line for me is definitely there. This is kind of dovetails with personnel groupings, but the usage of Max Bredesen, like that is a wrinkle, being that he's a rookie fullback from Michigan, who every coach I talked to in Michigan or who was at Michigan, spending time around Max Bredesen, they raved about this guy, his intelligence, his ability to run block, his ability to insert, and one of the, I'd say, calling cards of the Miami Dolphins run game down the back half of last season, which was really, really good. And the Miami Dolphins run games that Frank Smith was a part of in Miami was Alec Ingold, the fullback. And so are the Vikings utilizing Max Bredesen in a way that is similar or evokes some of kind of the picture that the Miami Dolphins run game evoked the last few years? Like, I think that's something. And then I'd say one more defensively is just like, what is Ryan Nielsen, the new defensive line coach, run game coordinator defensively? Like, what is his influence on the defensive line, on the front of the defense? What is his impact on potential stunts that the Vikings can utilize defensively, especially if they're having to dip into their depth from a defensive line standpoint? I think winning from a stunts perspective is going to be important. So, and then just, his Ryan Nielsen's role in the pass rush. So that's really 6 specifics in terms of wrinkles I'll be looking for. And obviously, as you guys know, longtime listeners of the show, but also readers of The Athletic, I mean, we are just beginning to scratch the surface of the amount of evaluation, observation, and introspection, you could say, that we're going to do, heading into training camp. But that hopefully that gives you a perspective a little bit of where my mind is at. Next question comes from DFW_skull. So this person probably lives in Dallas, and if you do, it's probably hot as heck. I'd say go to Terry Black's barbecue because it's, in my opinion, really good, even though some people think it's overrated. But that's a conversation or an argument we could have in the comment section or on social media. But DFW Skull asked, why in the world would Nolan Teasley extend Kyler Murray for $40 million or $50 million per year when his team absolutely owned/dominated Kyler for so many years? No way Nolan signed up to be the Vikings GM just to hitch his wagon to Kyler. First and foremost, let's just get this, abundantly clear, because I'm not going to lie. Like, I've been at the grocery store, I've been at a golf course, or I've bounced around the Twin Cities and I've had people ask me questions like, would the Vikings extend Kyler Murray? And I get it. I understand it. There's a Sam Darnold psychology that is involved with it, but I cannot underscore this, italicize this, bold this enough. This question, this conversation is so far down the road. And I know we love talking about the future because it's hope, because it's, that's just what we do probably as human beings. And that's me included. Like, I'm not, not just subjecting this to you guys, but, this one is getting so far ahead of it. But I will talk a little bit about it. I'd say, before you get to how much or would Nolan Teasley pay Kyler, it's, will he win the job? Will he stay healthy? Will he perform? How far will that go? How far will the team go? What will the relationships be like with Kevin O'Connell, with the teammates, with the fan base? How has JJ McCarthy progressed? How does he feel? Like, there is I would say a box of chocolates of questions that you have to answer before you get to this one that many people want to obviously talk about. And so I'll break down a couple things. So I looked at this because it probably behooves me to know, and you guys will benefit from knowing it, hopefully. But this person said, after the Seahawks absolutely owned, dominated Kyler for so many years. First and foremost, I can't say I've been attentive to every Cardinals Seahawks matchup. So I went and I looked. Since 2019, Kyler started for the Cardinals in 11 games against the Seahawks. The Cardinals are 2-9 in those games. Kyler averaged 213 pass yards per game in those games with a 68% completion percentage, 14 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. EPA per dropback was like 0.00, so not exceptional at all. So, the Seahawks, I guess in many ways you could say they have owned and dominated Kyler in the history since Kyler Murray entered the NFL. There's obviously the context of teammates, of different teams, of different rosters, of different coaching staffs, but there's no question that, people in the NFC West, and Nolan Teasley is one of those people, would have a very good feel of what Kyler Murray has been capable of. Now, the question that we will all find out the answer to if Kyler Murray wins the quarterback competition that the Vikings are going to have beginning in training camp, does being in a new system with a new environment, a new head coach, and a new way of thinking about playing the position in many ways, like, does that unlock a level that was not previously evident in the NFC West? And I mean, we will all, again, observe the answer to that question. But to get back to the hypothetical, I mean, this time 2 years ago, before Sam Darnold even played and the opportunity to extend Sam even existed, and all the highs and lows of what that was. Like, if you just went to this time of before that season, the question was, like, at what point will the Vikings toss JJ McCarthy into the mix? Then JJ McCarthy tore his meniscus, and it was, everything was kind of rendered moot. That conversation, that was the most popular one at this time 2 years ago, that was rendered moot completely. So I just think, talking about this subject gets so far out in front of your skis, of my skis, of our skis. that I don't want to, I just don't want to belabor it or think too deeply. And I would also be lying if I said that, I've had enough exposure with Nolan Teasley, the front office, to know how they view that type of situation. And when you don't, know what are all the other dynamics of the market, what are the other dynamics of the quarterback room, like it's just really, really difficult to go down that road, even though I understand it. I promise you, I understand it. Vicologist, who's always active on social media, and I appreciate their I'd say support of both the writing and the show over the course of the last couple of years, asked, do you see the Vikings signing another free agent before the start of training camp? Someone like Jadeveon Clowney. I would say, first and foremost, we'll get to Clowney, but before the start of training camp, do I expect like a big name signing before training camp? I would say like it's not something I'm waiting immediately for is what I'd say. Like I'd probably, if I was to power rank it, I'd say like Brian O'Neill contract extension would probably be the higher on the list topic or item that I would maybe be looking, or I'd say that I probably wouldn't be as surprised by, but part of it is when you're talking about some of these edge rushers specifically. I think if a lot of these players haven't signed by now, they're probably going to wait to see what is their best opportunity, and potentially an injury could occur that would unlock an opportunity that might warrant a certain amount of money that they're not being offered now or that they haven't been offered, and then just an opportunity to prove themselves. As far as Jadeveon Clowney, I'm glad you asked, Vicologist, because it allowed me to dive a little bit into what Jadeveon Clowney did in 2025, and I was, quite frankly, pretty blown away. I do remember last year, before the Vikings played the Cowboys late in the season on Sunday Night Football, like I do every week, and you guys who listen and read, this, like I rewatch the game that the team played a week before, or sometimes it's a game the team that the Vikings are playing played against a similar opponent, to get a feel for their offense and defense and their personnel and their roster. And it's just a process thing that I put myself through to try to enter these games with a very clear understanding that goes beyond the numbers that I can get or just the narratives or perceptions that you can find about players. And I remember at the time, the Cowboys defense was clearly one of the worst in the NFL. It's why they fired Matt Eberflus and hired Christian Parker. But I do recall like looking at their front, and by this time they had traded for Quinnen Williams, but I just remember looking at the front and even the edge guys, and it was like Ezeraku, the rookie from Boston College. It was Jadeveon Clowney, and thinking, and I remember with Clowney specifically being like, is Jadeveon Clowney the guy that everyone thought he could be or thought he would be when he clobbered the Michigan running back and had his helmet pop off in college at South Carolina? Like, I don't know, but the guy was definitely talented. So when this question came in, and I admittedly hadn't done a work on each of these specific edge rushers until now, I went at True Media, which I use for some of our advanced analytics at The Athletic, and I looked at, so Jadeveon Clowney rushed the passer last year 209 snaps. So I organized the spreadsheet give me all of the guys who rushed the passer in 2025 at least 200 times. And there were 184 guys. Of those 184, guess where Jadeveon Clowney ranked in pressure rate? I'll give you a second. I'll give you 5 seconds. I'll give you 10 seconds. I'll give you 50 seconds, and you would never guess it. He was fourth out of 184. It absolutely, positively, without question, undoubtedly blew me away that the ranking went Will Anderson Jr., not surprising, Nick Bonito, edge rusher for the Broncos, not surprising, Micah Parsons, you've probably heard of him, and then Jadeveon Clowney. That was crazy to me. For a 32-year-old who wasn't really a full-time starter. I believe he played in 13 games, started 6 games, may have signed late in the season with Dallas. For that to have been the case and for him to rank fourth in pressure rate, was wowing. So again, I understand why asking about Jadeveon Clowney is a thing. He had 8.5 sacks. Now I will say his average time to sack, because these numbers have to be put in a ton of context, was 4.78 seconds. That's a long time. It was one of the slowest average time to sack in the NFL. Last year he was paid $3.45 million for 1 year. And so if you're asking me, like if that was possible to the Vikings, I can't fathom the idea that they would not be interested in making something like that happen. Now, the question is, and I've said this on the podcast in recent weeks, and I think it's important to reiterate, does Jadeveon Clowney want to be a backup with Dallas Turner or split time? Does Jadeveon Clowney believe he's deserving of much more money considering the numbers I just laid out? Does Jadeveon Clowney, wait to see if there is an injury so he can sign to be a starter? Like, all of those questions are, those must be answered by Jadeveon Clowney in his camp. And I'd say that would delay the potential of something like that happening. I mean, I looked at some of the other free agents, like you've got Joey Bosa was probably 40-ish in pressure rate. Hassan Reddick was probably 60-ish. You're dealing with a pretty similar crop of experienced guys who are definitely aging, who all have different, I don't want to use the words warts. I don't want to use the word warts because, some of these guys are still really talented. But they all have their different layers of advantages and disadvantages. But fortunately for the Vikings, the type of person they'd be looking for a role, you're not replacing Andrew Van Ginkel. You're not finding an edge rusher who's just like Andrew Van Ginkel who could fill his role. It's going to be much easier for the Vikings to find someone who can fill the pass rush in type of role that Jonathan Grenard had, and now that Dallas Turner's stepping in for 2026. So good question. I'd say edge rusher remains TBD, and if it goes into training camp, you've seen the way, obviously it's a different regime, but you've seen the way they've operated in past years where they will assess the roster into training camp. Sometimes there will be visits. Stephon Gilmore, for example, and there have been other guys, and then they pull the trigger then. So TBD, we'll see. But Clowney, I think that would be a really good move for depth. And I as in putting my analyst hat on, I think I would really support the idea of bringing someone like that in beyond just the on field. The ability to continue to mentor Dallas Turner. You forget, he's still a really young player. I do think that would be important. All right, let's get a first break from our presenting sponsor, First Resource Bank. All right, if you listen to the show, you know First Resource Bank. They are a member FDIC bank in the Minneapolis area, run by really good people. I played golf with Charlie Anderson on Wednesday. That's why I look like I'm mimicking Jordan Spieth, who will be playing in the TPC Twin Cities, which I was pumped about as just a general sports fan. But played golf with Charlie at the bank. He works with Aaron Siegley, who met us out there afterwards, and then Tim Siegley has been running the thing for a long time. These guys, they do such a good job of connecting different people within the community, and their banks are just so well run, such a phenomenal operation with a great online banking platform. And then early this week, because I'm moving apartments, had to go in and get a cashier's check. You know me. I don't know how the heck to do that. So I go in, it's a seamless, easy, type of process to get that done at First Resource Bank. They've got branches all over the place, one in Lino Lakes, one on Washington near US Bank. So just, really, really great people who care about the community, support the Vikings. They want to talk. I walked in, they want to talk quarterback. So, I would just say if you want to be around really good people who, are connectors within the community, I cannot say enough, about First Resource Bank. All right. Next question comes from JT. Do the Vikings have enough cap space for LeBron James? Awesome question. Look, my pitch to LeBron James would be beyond the basketball playing with Anthony Edwards, and even beyond the come to Minnesota. I will say this, like, I don't think you could explain to someone, and you guys can correct me if you think I'm wrong about this, but this is just my perspective being here, living here now 4+ years or 4 years. Like, I don't think you could explain to someone on the outside accurately and really with enough revealing nature what it would mean for someone like him to come to this place and take one of, the men's sports teams that haven't won a championship in multiple decades to the mountaintop, like what that would mean to this place and what that would do for that person in this place. And maybe, LeBron James at this point in his career, he wants national relevance and not local relevance. But for all of the, perceptions on LeBron and however, people feel very strongly about LeBron and he's polarizing, the idea of him coming here and doing for this city what this city has waited on the edge of, what the Twin Cities have waited on the edge of their seats for so long. It's just like, it's a fairy tale that's so fun to think about, at least for me, who's just like a crazy sports fan. But my biggest pitch, even beyond that, and beyond the golf, like the food scene. And you guys who listen to the show, and even whether if you know me, if you don't know me, you probably have gotten to know by now. Like I am a big foodie to the point of probably annoyance. I don't post about it. I don't talk about it. I really don't like, mention everything I do all the time. But I can say with clarity and with conviction that Minneapolis is one of the most underrated food cities in the country. And I'm talking about restaurants in the North Loop. I don't need to shout out individually, but I mean, I'm talking about Boucheron. I'm talking about, just your places that you wouldn't even, you just wouldn't expect it. But it is such a good food city that would be my pitch to LeBron. Come here, drink some wine, etc. But the Vikings have enough cap space. I do think 13 personnel with Josh Oliver, LeBron James, and Hawkinson would be pretty interesting. Next question. In your opinion, how long can the Vikings afford the starting quarterback battle to drag out before naming a starter? At some point, someone will need to take most of the starting reps to get a great rhythm with the offense going. Carson Babini. I've gone back and forth on this a lot. And I would say, it's my expectation, or it's my belief, that after the first few weeks of training camp, when you really get into the throes of it, you got to have a pretty clear idea and understanding of the direction you're going to go. And I recall, if you go back to 2024, JJ McCarthy took some reps, Sam Darnold took some reps, and then, what's interesting looking back is before the joint practices in Cleveland, JJ McCarthy, the Vikings were preparing to give him more reps. Not the majority of the reps, but definitely more reps. And so Kevin O'Connell at that time was even comfortable, in joint practices being a little bit, free with the reps. And so And obviously that season played out the way it did. And because of JJ's injury, Sam got all the reps in joint practices, and that probably benefited him immensely come the beginning of the season, where they still had to work through some kinks throughout the first half of the season offensively. So I would say, first few weeks, I think that's really when the rubber meets the road. And then joint practices, I believe, is August 20th. So that's like about 3 weeks in against the Ravens. I think to have a pretty good feel at that time is probably where, in my opinion, and again, this is analyst hat and less just objective journalist hat on, that's probably where the criticism of it, especially and it's probably where you can play revisionist history a little bit, afterward, depending on how it goes. So that's kind of what I'd say. But I think early on, because in the spirit of competition, the way that Kevin O'Connell has talked about this, like both guys are going to get opportunity, and it's at that point, it's incumbent on Kyler Murray to run with it. And for JJ McCarthy, it's incumbent upon him to show and prove that it should go on. And, how that progresses from there. I mean, we'll just watch it every single day and talk about it probably on the Alec Lewis show every single day, which I'm looking forward to. But I'd be curious what you guys think on that. Like Carson, you asked the question. So what is the point at which you're starting to get a little, I don't know, skittish about the time that it takes? Like I'd wonder that from your perspective, just from a fan's viewpoint. Question from Graham. How much grace / belief does KOC still have if we miss the playoffs again this year? Love him as a coach, but the quarterback situation is what it is. Hard to blame him. I'd say, yeah, in some ways it's hard to blame him, but also I would say there's no question that Kevin O'Connell, as the Vikings head coach, and I've said this many times in podcasts and in the writing, like he's had major influence on who the quarterback has been. Now, you can't obviously reinvent the wheel and just go find Tom Brady or Drake May or Joe Burrow. Like circumstances do have to fall in your lap. So there's really a cap on what you can, I don't like, not a salary cap. There is there's only so many hands that you have to play, in terms of who can be your quarterback. But, the idea of moving on from Kirk Cousins after his torn Achilles and drafting JJ McCarthy, I mean, and putting together the draft process and manning the draft process that led to JJ McCarthy. Kevin O'Connell had his fingerprints, all on that. I mean, the process of Sam Darnold and obviously the way that went contractually, Kevin O'Connell obviously had his hand in that. And then when you go to bring in Kyler Murray, there's no question the Vikings didn't have a full-time GM. So Kevin O'Connell drove that process. So, separating him from, the quarterback situation completely, I just don't think you can do that. As far as, if the Vikings miss the playoffs again this year, how much, grace belief does he still have? It's probably dependent on a couple things. One, how does the offense look? Two, how did the quarterback decision with Kyler Murray go? Three, what is the locker room feeling? What Justin Jefferson's feeling? All of that stuff will factor into that. But, I'm always kind of a long-term oriented thinker. And I don't think one down season should ever dictate massive decisions of leadership, especially when that leadership has proven to be really effective. And Kevin O'Connell absolutely has proven to be really effective as a leader, as a culture builder, and at times as an offensive play caller. It's just going to be about, how lofty can it go? What does the consistency level look like? And then what is the off ramp if they do miss the playoffs from a quarterback perspective to be able to maintain faith once again? Because, the longer it goes, where a playoff win has not won, and this showed itself in the survey, the harder it's going to be to just maintain trust, respect, hope from a fan base that really wants to continue to put it in, which I appreciate. Let's get a couple more words from sponsors, and then we'll be back answering some final questions. All right, let's start with Pro MN Athletics, which has been an awesome partner for the Alec Lewis show the last few months. And the best way I know to describe it is three guys, Kurt, Graham, and Tanner. They came together. They're like, how can we lift the tide of youth development of football in Minnesota? They love football. They want to produce as much talent as possible in this region, even though there's already a ton of it. And so they've put together a ton of events and a ton of options. If your kids play football, if you have friends who play football, like and they've got, players with visions of playing in high school, playing in college, I cannot recommend, just Pro MN Athletics enough. They've got a summer 7-on-7 league for 5th through 9th graders going on right now. Tanner Morgan, who played quarterback at the U, is coaching a ton of quarterbacks who have FBS, FCS trajectory in the state. Graham Gressett from Maple Grove, Bo Schwartz from Shakopee, the 2029 class, Jake Kaiser, Chanhassen, Gus Olson, Farmington, Will Gurnett, Edina, Jameson Mackey, Wyzetta. Tanner's working with all of them from a quarterback perspective. And then they've got training programs for other positions, offensive line, receiver, etc. And I'd say, like, if you have a kid who loves football, who really is motivated and wants to be around a ton of like-minded guys and learn from folks who have played at a really high level, I highly, highly recommend Pro MN Athletics. Cannot thank them enough for their support. Lastly, let's talk about Aquarius Home Services, your independent, authorized Connecticut water systems dealer. It's summer, and that means it is home improvement season. At Aquarius, they know that managing a household and all the expenses that come with it is no easy task. They also know how important having worry-free water in your home is. Your family deserves water you can trust. I mean, trust, it does. You use it every day, whether you realize it or not. For drinking, for cooking, for cleaning, for bathing. That's why they are excited to share their summer trade-in and trade-up program. Trade in your old water softener and trade up to a Connecticut whole home water treatment system. The best part, you can get additional $500 off on top of your summer sale prices that Aquarius Home Services has. So it's a great time to do it. Aquarius is running the trade-in, trade-up program, and it's a game changer. You truly do not want to have or to worry about your water. You don't want to worry about contaminants in it. You don't want to have to be working hard to ensure that your water is as clean and easy to use as possible. So please check out Aquarius Home Services, where you can get a new Connecticut water system. All right, final couple questions from you guys, and these were awesome today, so I really appreciate it. Michigan Scolger wants to know, should we pump our brakes on the usage we expect from Damon Claiborne? If he gets more than 200 yards this year, I'll be very surprised. So Damon Claiborne, for the uninitiated, is the rookie running back drafted out of Wake Forest, who I had people in the league say, who compared him from a talent perspective and a juice and explosiveness perspective to guys like Devon Achane, which is incredibly high praise. And it's also sensible to think, why would Frank Smith, the assistant head coach, want a guy like Damon Claiborne as part of the Vikings offense? Because his speed allows the Vikings wide zone scheme to really work. I mean, that it is a part of this scheme, because it's such a concept that requires all 11 to be on the same page, necessitates speed at the snap and for a running back to go to 0 to 100 very, very quickly. And so I don't know, pumping the brakes on Damon Claiborne, I don't necessarily know if I would. There's obviously going to be a runway from a playbook understanding standpoint, from a pass protection understanding standpoint, that Damon Claiborne is going to have to master for Kevin O'Connell to trust him enough to have him out there on Sundays and to be giving him snaps. But to have a change of pace guy who can inspire fear from opposing defenses at the running back position just really isn't something that the Vikings have had a ton of since Kevin O'Connell's been here. I mean, Dalvin Cook maybe in 2022, Aaron Jones at times, certainly since he's been here, maybe a little bit of Jordan Mason in 2025, but I'd say down the back half of the season, if Damon Claiborne is productive from a consistency perspective day to day, and if he's really taken to the playbook and to some of the pass protection rules, I don't see why the Vikings couldn't, disperse him within some of their personnel in the run game. And if they do that, it's just hard to deny that there is some home run hitting ability that could lift him to a certain level. So I'd say maybe pump the brakes at your own risk, and we'll see what happens. Next question comes from Eric Hansen. I absolutely love this one. What clutch situation would terrify you the most? 25-foot putt to win the Masters, catch and shoot situation in Game 7 to win the NBA Finals, 1 out from a perfect game facing Shohei Ohtani, 1 second from giving Minnesota its first Stanley Cup, and you have to stop Connor McDavid on a penalty shot. Well, I mean, you guys, I'm from Alabama. I've never played hockey, and the goaltender thing, it shocks me how these guys are able to process the puck flying around so quickly. So I think, honestly, my answer would be stopping Connor McDavid on a penalty shot with 1 second to give Minnesota its first Stanley Cup. I mean, the magnitude of that, like obviously the magnitude of winning the Masters, you could then have your Masters dinner and you wear the green jacket, and that's like pretty cool. But like, I'd say the idea of doing something for a place like you would be doing by winning the Stanley Cup here and having to stop Connor McDavid on a penalty shot and with, just in isolation to do that's got to be the answer. Just has to be the answer. There's just no other way. So yeah, that's where we're going to go. Next question comes from Purple Context. Back in early June, you wrote a great piece that talked about the changes coming to the run game, specifically what will be expected from the O-line. At the end, you mentioned a more stable passing game. What do you think KOC's version of stability looks like? That's a really good question. And I mean, I would just say stable in terms of conviction that when the read is there, more often than not, especially if it's a first or second read, that the ball will be thrown accurately to where those yards can be banked on. Like, I just think there were so many times throughout the 2025 season where, first reads there, outbreaker toward the left sideline, and the ball sails out of bounds, and now it's 2nd and 10 as opposed to 2nd and 3. And as a play caller, you're just really set back from that standpoint. So I just view stability less in terms of production, more in terms of just the nuts and bolts of when early reads that have been schemed open are available, can the quarterback consistently at a very high clip put the ball in the receiver's hands? And if you can't do that, then it's just instability writ large. So that's kind of what I view when I say more stable passing game. Hopefully that answers that. And that'll do it for episode 181 of the Alec Lewis Show. Appreciate all of you passing along questions. If I didn't get to yours, toss them in the comments on YouTube while you subscribe, and I'll answer them, or throw them at me on social media at Alec_Lewis. Also took some questions from Instagram at Alec Lewis Show. So please follow us there. We'll toss out the question call, and it's pretty awesome to field questions there. But thank you guys for being here. We appreciate First Resource Bank for their presenting sponsorship. We appreciate Great Clips Pro Men Athletics, Aquarius Home Services for their support. We'll be back later this week with a guest who is one of my favorites. Should be very fun to talk to. And enjoy your week. Talk to you very, very soon.